Welcome back from spring break. I hope that it was good for you and you've got some time to relax and maybe read a book or two. For the next few weeks, we're going to be studying the Maya, which was an amazing civilization along with the Inca and the Aztec civilizations, which we'll be studying later uh, this month coming up. Uh, I have for you first a little video intro to the Maya. Here it is. Hope you enjoy it. All right, so that's your little teaser for the Mayas and a little bit of what you're going to expect as what's coming up. First of all, I want to start off today with a little bit about the location of the Maya Empire. Uh, it was located, as you can see here, in Mesoamerica and lasted for about 3,000 years. There are still Maya people today. From about 2000 to about 1500 AD or CE, as we say now, Common Era. Theirs was the most powerful civilization from about 300 to about 900 AD, which we call the Classic Maya time. They were located, as you can see here, in Mexico, Guatemala, and Honduras. Here's another view. You can see the globe up here. And this is the area of the Maya civilizations, and you see it here on a blow up. Just a sec. This is going to go on somehow. Sorry, I lost track of my slide. Most of the Maya civilization was placed, as you could see from the earlier slides, in rainforest. And so they had a lot of particular challenges in their day. As you can see, in a tremendous amount of rain, they had to figure out how to move huge amounts of water and as well as how to farm in this sort of an environment. So they would typically use slash and burn agriculture, where they would go ahead and burn down the rainforest, cut it down, and then burn it down, slash and burn, and then grow their crops until such a time that the land could no longer sustain the crops, and then they would slash and burn another part and grow crops there. We still use some of those techniques today, and it is really, really hard on the rainforests. So this is a view of some ruins, Mayan ruins in the jungle today. Here's a recovered Mayan city. This is actually the city of Tikal. Pretty amazing what it looks like. Visit. The significant dates, which we talked a little bit about, you can see timeline here. The Olmec people were those that predated the Maya civilizations. We had sort of the early pre-classic Mayan times from 1800 to 900 before Common Era, then the more pre-classic from about the year 900 into the late pre-classic and then the early classic and through the post-classic, this time period here, which is a time period that we'll be mostly focusing on. Middle Ages, of course, the colonial period was after uh, the this area. The Mayan people were greeted by those who came from the explorers who are coming from Europe, and you know a little bit about that already. We'll be going into that a little bit more. Mayan people, the Mayan civilization was one that had city states, just like Rome, the Republic of Rome, and the Italian city states, of course, of the Renaissance times. This next graphic gives you sort of a picture of where some of those city states were. I've been to Chichen Itza, which is not pronounced in that way. I'll get the correct pronunciation for you. I've also been to Tulum. It's beautiful. Ruins of Chichen Itza. I climbed El Castillo there, this huge castle, and I'm terrified of heights. I'll show you the picture of me standing on the steps. Tulum is actually on the beach, absolutely beautiful. I've also been to Koba, and you can still climb the pyramids at the pyramid at Koba. I have a picture of my daughters reenacting a sacrifice, a human sacrifice on top of the pyramid here. I also have some pictures of my younger daughter and I as we're both crying, climbing up the stairs because we're so terrified at the height. It's pretty funny. So each one of these city-states would have been ruled by a king. Most of the lords or kings were men. There were a few female rulers as well. So again, these are the areas. Most of these areas have been excavated to some degree, so you can visit amazing places. Many, many, many are still hidden under the jungle, so places to develop further as well. Here's another view of the Mayan city-states, just to give you another picture. I liked this here because it gives you a little graphic of what some of the ruins today look like. Here, next I have for you a 3-minute peek, video peek into the classic Maya period. If the sound is bad, just adjust it on your computer. Hopefully get this going.
The Maya. They're considered one of the most advanced civilizations to have existed in the Americas before the Spanish conquest. But who exactly were the ancient Maya people, and what led to the collapse of their civilization? As early as 1800 BC, the Maya had begun settling and established villages in what is today Mexico and Central America. Maya civilization peaked from 250 to 900 AD, during what archaeologists call the Classic period. More than 40 cities flourished throughout the region, with populations as large as 50,000. The Maya built magnificent urban centers consisting of stone structures, including pyramid temples that were central to Maya religious practices. In addition to these impressive city structures, agriculture played a key role in Maya civilization. Corn was one of the predominant crops. The Maya creation story tells of nature gods, the basis of Maya religion, who created humans out of yellow and white corn. The Maya also made significant advancements in mathematics and astronomy. They invented the concept of zero, and they developed an accurate calendar system. Used to guide the Maya agricultural cycles, the calendar was based on observations of the sun and sky over thousands of years. The Maya also developed the only known system of writing in Mesoamerica, hieroglyphs. In fact, much of what we know about ancient Maya civilization comes from deciphering hieroglyphic characters inscribed in pottery, stone slabs, and other ruins discovered at ancient sites. Hieroglyphs have revealed that, despite the Maya's ingenuity and agrarian lifestyle, conflict was prevalent among some Maya city-states as they battled for control of the region. Throughout much of the Classic period, the city-state of Tikal, located in modern-day Guatemala, reigned as the closest thing to an empire in Maya history. But For a period of roughly 130 years, the Tikal people were overtaken through force and diplomacy by the Kanul, a rival kingdom. Toward the end of the Classic period, around 900 AD, most Maya cities had collapsed. Among the theories are warfare, a volcanic eruption, and, perhaps most likely, drought. However, archaeologists still debate why, as new evidence continues to emerge. Despite the decline of ancient Maya civilization, the Maya people have by no means disappeared. More than 7 million Maya are estimated to be alive today in their indigenous homelands and around the world. While they participate in modern global life, they continue to follow agricultural and ceremonial practices of their ancestors.
So our next part here is, let's see if I can get my back, here I am, the Maya social and political organization. So now is the time that you need to go ahead and take notes. That means you'll need to access your assignment from today. Be sure to make a copy first. Hopefully the formatting stays. I tried really hard to make the formatting stay. So pause the video, open up your assignment, and get ready to type in notes. Hopefully you'll be able to just type notes right on the screen, and I've made it so that you can just look at the slide and take notes directly from the slide. Fill in the blank. So the top of the Mayan hierarchy is the Lord, and the Maya lived in many independent cities, each with its own government. The highest authority in Maya ceremonial center was the Halach and Unique, a Maya word which means true man. With the help of his advisors, his chiefs and priests, he handled the city's internal and external affairs. He ruled for life and was considered a god king. He was succeeded by a son or other close relative. Occasionally, those were women. You'll hear about them, some of them, as we go forward. Rulers were the women, however, seemed to also exercise considerable power in the decision making of the king, so they weren't completely disregarded. The next the next level of the hierarchy was the noble. Below the lord were the nobles, who served as chiefs and lesser officials and oversaw the administration of the Maya cities. Some nobles lived in hamlets surrounding the main ceremonial centers. They ruled over hamlets that consisted of hundreds of compounds, each housing an extended Maya family. Nobles gathered taxes, supplies, and labor for projects such as construction of temples and ball courts. You'll hear more about the ball courts later. They're pretty interesting. They also were the war captains who led the peasant armies to battle during war, because oftentimes one of the city states would be battling with a nearby city state, and if they were to capture the leader of the nearby rival city state, they might sacrifice that leader to the gods. That was supposed to be considered to be the ultimate sacrifice, and more about sacrifices later as we get into this. During battles, they would wear elaborate costumes, including headdresses with animal heads, animal skins such as jaguar pelts. There were jaguars in the jungle, still jaguars there today. They would wear feathered capes, sometimes of the Quetzal bird, which is this amazing green bird with these huge green feathers, which are just outstandingly beautiful. Only the nobles were allowed to wear the feathers, nobles and the kings, of course. And they would have also jewelry. The nobles who lived in hamlets, which were sort of removed from the city centers, were not as important as the nobles living in each one of the ceremonial centers. Next in the hierarchy are the priests, and the priests, we know about them from contemporary Maya practices and from a few codices or native manuscripts that were written during the post-classic period. Maya priests conceived of a universe in which the heavens were divided into 13 compartments. Each compartment was ruled by a god, And in similar fashion, the underworld had 9 divisions, each ruled by its own god. The principal Maya gods were forces and objects that affected the material welfare of the people: the god of rain, the god of the heavens, the god of corn, and the much feared god of death. Many gods had animal attributes. The jaguar, for instance, was immensely important to the classic Maya. Worshipping gods in the form of animals was consistent with the Maya belief that humans were an integral part of nature. The Maya believed their lives were influenced by a series of natural and supernatural forces. They held several beliefs about the creation of the world. Almost all of these myths held that the gods created the world at several times, but each time they destroyed it because they were dissatisfied with their own handicrafts. The ancient Maya believed that since their world was a recreation of a past world, it could be destroyed at any time. Maintaining the favor of the gods thus became not simply a pious duty, but the key to existence itself. Sacrifices and offerings were a key way the Maya appeased their gods. Priests led ritual practices that included fasting, penance by bloodletting after being picked with a cactus spine or the spine of a stingray, the burning of incense, and very limited human sacrifice. More about that later. Along with their religious functions, priests also were great mathematicians, astronomers, healers, and chroniclers of the time. Priests were incredibly important, and you'll learn more about some of the city states later where they had astronomical observatories as well as just this amazing calendar system that the earlier video sort of touched upon. All right, next in the line here are the Maya merchants and artisans. And the Maya were really accomplished traders and artisans. Oh, let's bring me back in the picture here. Uh, they traveled by sea, by river, and by well-constructed road system. You'll learn more about the roads. They too were absolutely amazing, rivaling the Roman Appian Way, I would say. You can make your own decisions about that once you learn more about it. The merchants imported obsidian, jade, and other precious stones, such as as well as things like I told you about before, the quetzal, this iridescent green bird, absolutely beautiful. You can still see them today. They had feathers. They had copal, which is sap from a tree that was used as incense during the religious ceremonies. Cocoa beans they got from the Mayan highlands. Cocoa beans were sometimes used as a form of currency, and they would make drinks from the cocoa beans, and it was pretty expensive. So generally, the nobles and the kings would drink the cocoa, although all the people might have access to it at times. For sale, they had salt and cotton goods, honey dried fish, seashells, and the skins of animals. Maya artisans labored on a large variety of projects, most designed to pay tribute to the gods. They painted books on paper codices made from the inner bark of fig trees, created and painted beautiful pottery, and painted beautiful rich murals depicting vivid scenes of Maya life and important battles. They created sculptures used to adorn temples. They used both paint and stone to form decorative designs on palace walls, and they also fashioned death masks out of jade. They also did amazing tattooings on their bodies, in their ears. They had big. They would put uh, the little things in their ears that would make them expand. I always forget the name of that. They would in the middle of their nose, their septum of their nose, they would put different sorts of jewelry pieces. They would have necklaces often made out of feathers and other sorts of items. Like I said, tattoos, they would paint themselves different colors. Blue was not the color you wanted to paint yourself because that was a sign of sacrifice, someone to be sacrificed, but a lot of different ways to adorn their bodies as well as sell different things. The next level on our hierarchy here are the Mayan peasants. The men typically would work in the field, and the women typically would manage the household, sort of like traditional 1950s United States a little bit. Peasants might be rewarded for their loyalty by being allowed to attend royal marriages and important religious ceremonies. They typically would get up before dawn and eat a breakfast drink of sort of this corn gruel sort of things. Corn was the major staple that they would tend to eat, gruel, sort of a porridge sort of thing. It's also, of course, tortillas, and then beans would be there as well. Squash. Sometimes they would have wild turkey or rabbit. Those were also eaten. Um, if they weren't working in the fields, they might have a day that would be spent building pyramids or the temple. Um, in exchange for their toil in the fields, people would be rewarded by being able to attend royal marriages, which would be a huge celebration, and of course, ceremonies that would mark key religious events. The Mayans, with their uh, astronomical observations, correctly predicted all the eclipses and even the arrival of comets, and had an amazing calendar. And so the people would assemble for different times of the year in some of their cities. Their temples would be aligned perfectly to with the stars and the solar paddles. So, like say the solstice, they would form shadows in Chichen Itza at the solstices. You can see a serpent pattern come down the the sides of El Castillo, and so it looks like a serpent if you're there. And this is, it's a huge temple. It's absolutely amazing how they built it. In any case, back to the peasants. During the dry seasons, peasants often served as warriors, and they would fight, of course, to capture rival soldiers for sacrifice or for enslavement. If you were captured in battle, you would often be made into a slave. And also, just like the captains, they might wear these fancy headdresses made with different animal heads or decorated with feathers and whatnot. The next and lowest part of our hierarchy is, of course, the slaves. Maya art depicts numerous people who were slaves. Some slaves were born into servitude. Oh, let's get me back here. And others were recruited from three main sources. A family experiencing hard times could sell off surplus children. Oh, you're an extra into slavery. War prisoners of humble status were directed into slavery. Those of higher rank, lucky them, were often sacrificed to the gods. And slavery was a legal punishment for certain crimes. Slaves were required to work for the nobles, carrying merchandise, paddling canoes, farming, fanning the flies away from their masters, collecting noxious materials for dyeing, and grinding maize corn. It was a big deal to grind the corn, and you can see what they used to grind the corn. Pretty interesting. We use sort of mortar and pestle today. Many cooks do. I do as a cook, because there are some things that you want to grind up by hand because it gives you a better product in the end. So there you go. Slaves really weren't treated badly in general, but when an important person died, sometimes his slaves would be killed and buried with them. And again, if you were captured in a battle, sorry, not in burial, if you were captured in a battle, you might be sacrificed. So that sounds like a pretty harsh treatment, but again, as well, when you were sacrificed, you felt like you were going to live in the next place, so it wasn't as horrible to them as it might sound to some of us today. All right, our last live here, a little preview for you of what's coming up on Thursday. You're going to watch a segment called The Death Empire, and what do you think that might feature? You can make a guess and see if you're correct. When you finish your notes, hopefully you pause the video to take notes as works out for you. Please just submit them to Schoology, and I'll check to make sure they're all complete. And you can hopefully make a copy before you do, so you might use those in the future. Mostly it's just to see that you were able to follow along in the video. So have a great rest of your day, guys. Email me if you have any challenges. I'll be at office hours in the afternoon. I gave you the time on today's agenda, so check that out. All right, bye.